back down and shut your trap. It's time for
Keeping It Sports with M3.
Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Well, I'll need some beer.
Are you ready?
You have to ask me nicely.
Come on now, don't be bashful.
Are you ready? Are you ready for
Place for the best sports talk and news surrounding each league.
I can prove it with my usual flawless logic.
Hey man, this time I'm gonna do it my way.
What's your name again?
And now, here's your host, M3, Mike Rosansky. Coming to you from Cherry Hill, New Jersey. It's time for Keeping It Sports with M3, powered by the Connecticut School of Broadcasting. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope everything's going well for you here on this Monday, the 5th day of February. I am, of course, your host, Mike M3 Rosansky, coming to you 6 days away from Super Bowl Sunday. A day that, quite frankly, I can't wait for, not just because of the matchup, but because of the fact that it's always an awkward time for me, that week in between the championship games and the Super Bowl. It's a week where I'm looking around wondering, all right, what the hell am I going to talk about? You don't see a lot of these networks, a lot of these other media outlets talking about the Super Bowl really until the Saturday and Sunday before the game. And then it's 7 days of essentially a nonstop pregame show. 7 days where you're like by Wednesday or Thursday, oh my God, just get me to the game at this point. How much further could you break down one game here? And then all of the hoopla, all of the events that occur during that week, during that 7 day span between the time when the two teams arrive in Las Vegas and when the game is actually played, it can become too much. So I'm always looking around for other things to talk about, especially considering we're at that weird time where there's not much to talk about in baseball, considering spring training is just about 10 days away, and there is surprisingly still some players out there available in free agency. Hockey is in the midst of their all-star break, and then you have the NBA. And that's where I'm going to get started today. Normally, this time of year, fans in this area are clamoring for spring training or looking ahead toward the second half of the hockey schedule. Not this year. This year, it's different. This year, you have actually something to root for, something to hope for, something that is fully capturing your attention, something that this area is quickly falling in love with, the New York Knicks. The New York Knicks, I said coming into this season, should have higher expectations, should have a higher bar that they should shoot for, that they should be setting for themselves. So far as the calendar has flipped from 2023 into 2024, they are living up to those expectations as they are one of, if not the hottest teams in the NBA, albeit coming off of a tough loss on Saturday night. But hey, you knew winning streaks come to an end at some point. You weren't going to just win out the rest of the schedule. But this team has a liveliness to it, has a fun to it, has a spunk to it that this fan base and this area has really grasped to. This fan base has really started to fall in love with. What you love about this group is it doesn't feel like, oh, this is the end of something. Because you look back on that team a decade ago with Carmelo Anthony, with Tyson Chandler, Amari Stoudemire and company, that team that won 54 games. And you look at them and you say, oh, that was a bunch of aging players on it. You had the likes of Jason Kidd. You had Rasheed Wallace in and out of the lineup on that team. You had a guy like Pablo Prigioni, who was in the later stages of his career basketball-wise, being that he had just come over from playing internationally. So it wasn't like you had a team there where you were envisioning long, sustained success. You can have those visions. You can have that belief with this team because all of these guys are in their 20s. All of these guys are relatively young, especially two of the guys that have been key pieces in this run that the Knicks have been on recently. And it's a run that is made even more impressive when you consider some of the injuries that the Knicks are dealing with. Because in past years, the Knicks would be, woe is me, would be a lot of complaints from Knicks fans, a lot of, oh, the sky is falling if you had these kind of injuries, with missing OG Anunoby for the last week, not having Quinn Grimes on Saturday night, and then more long-term injuries with what's going on with Julius Randle and whether or not Mitchell Robinson is going to return to play at some point during this season. In the past, the Knicks would have crumbled under that. But you have guys that are leaders on this team. You have guys that are of a winning mindset. And while in the past it would have looked corny, I think it's a big positive for this team that you have three guys that played together in college, in Josh Hart, Dante DiVincenzo, and of course, Jalen Brunson. These guys won 2 championships together in college. These guys know how to win. And although the college game is a completely different world than the beast that is the NBA, at least you have guys there that you've gone through the grind, that you've gone through the fight with. And when the chips are down, you can look to your left, you can look to your right, and you say, all right, we've been through this before. We're going to be okay. This situation is going to turn out all right for us. You lose Randle, who's been your second best player, and DiVincenzo steps up, has been awesome for the Knicks these last 4 games, even having a couple of 30-point games there in the mix. You're without Anunoby and Grimes. You're still getting that heart. You're getting that hustle from Josh Hart, albeit though it does weaken your bench a little bit because you would prefer him being part of that second unit and providing you that spark, providing you that energy to outlast the opposition's second unit and be a key contributor off the bench, which these injuries have been putting a little bit of a dent in that. And that's something you worry about long term because, as we know, Tom Thibodeau likes to go with a shorter rotation, likes to stretch things a little bit with these guys, and you worry as you go deeper in this season, you worry, oh, are these guys going to be gassed? Are these guys going to be physically exhausted once you get to April and May for playoff time and not be capable physically of going on a deep run? But with all of that, this year has also proven one thing. And you should be looking to the sky saying thank you each and every single day on that, because this is something you dreamed about for a long time. This is something that you wanted if you were a Knicks fan for the longest time. And that was a superstar to come here to play. That was a guy, a top-level player who actually wanted to take on the beast that is being a star in Madison Square Garden. And at the time when you signed him, you didn't think you were getting a superstar. You didn't think that you were getting somebody that is a top shelf, top of the line player, because he was a good player with the Dallas Mavericks. You saw his minutes steadily increase, and as that happened, his scoring steadily increase. But you didn't realize what this guy was capable of. But I think we're quickly becoming more and more clear that Jalen Brunson is a top player in this league. Jalen Brunson is a guy that isn't just an all heart and hustle kind of player. No, this is a guy that can truly lead a team. This is a guy that has this me against the world mentality, and no matter how bad things are going, you could turn to for that momentum changer at the snap of a finger to get your team going and carry you over a hurdle. And you look, last week, the Knicks had some easier games in their schedule. But with some of those injuries, you worry, maybe would the Knicks come in sleepwalking on playing the Hornets or playing the Jazz, but not Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson was as much of a leader as he's been all year long, maybe even greater, knowing the importance of the situation, being without Randall, being without OG Anunoby. On Thursday night, a game that past Knicks teams would typically have lost, where the Knicks couldn't make a shot to save their lives. We're missing 3 after 3. We're down by 15 points at points in the second half against the Pacers. Then once Halliburton left the game because of his minutes restriction, everything began to turn. It was like the Pacers were the team that early in the game couldn't miss a shot, became the team that couldn't make shots in crucial stretches. And Brunson solidified his spot in making the NBA All-Star team earlier that evening by putting up a 40-point performance in front of a lively crowd at Madison Square Garden. And you could see how much it meant to him after the game. You could see how much it meant to that fan base, to that team, this moment. Now, of course, the Knicks came up short on Saturday evening against the Lakers. Games like that are going to happen. No, the Knicks did not make a shot. Seemingly, the entire fourth quarter were very much shut down with the Lakers defense. And you look at it, it was just an awful shooting performance in that fourth quarter by the Knicks, when through 3 quarters, you look like you were going to continue on to a 10-game winning streak. Things like that happen. LeBron was coming in fully rested after sitting out against the Celtics the night before, as well as Anthony Davis. And you've seen the heater that Austin Reeves has been on recently. You could argue that was a more important game for the Lakers than the Knicks, but now the importance turns to the Knicks, where next game, got to get back on track. You got to get things flowing again. Don't want to potentially go into the All-Star break here on any form of a losing streak, any form of a cold streak, or forcing potentially Leon Rose's hand into doing something that maybe 10 days ago to 2 weeks ago he did not want to do, as far as upgrades to this roster. Because before the Randall injury, I think there was the feeling that the Knicks were just going to stand pat heading into the trade deadline. Maybe look around for a bench player, look around for a reserve role, but kind of stick with the group that they had, because they were very much gelling. They went 14-2 in the month of January. Were probably the best team in the league over that month. But now, as we sit here on this Monday afternoon, you look at this Knicks team, 32-18 through 50 games. There's really not a team in this Eastern Conference right now that you look at the Knicks and say, on a night-in, night-out basis, they can't beat this team. There's nobody like that, because look at it. The Celtics have become a team that lives and dies by the 3 way too much. Joe Mazzulla is getting torn to shreds up there in Boston, even after the amazing start that they have gotten off to. The Milwaukee Bucks are at a 1-2 start under Doc Rivers as their head coach. The Cavs have won 5 games in a row, but Still remains to be seen how much we truly trust them. And now you have the concerns injury-wise with both the Sixers and the Pacers, as the Pacers have Halliburton on a minutes restriction as he's had multiple hamstring injuries in the last month or so. And the Sixers are going to be without Joel Embiid for an extended period of time. So you have to start asking yourselves, do we change expectations even further? Do we raise the goalpost or push the goalpost back even more and try to make that big move, that big splash that 10 days to 2 weeks ago wasn't even a thought in the back of your mind? Do you say just settle with getting a role player like an Alec Burks who has familiarity with this system, familiarity playing for Tom Thibodeau, a guy like Malcolm Brogdon, both guys that would add a little scoring punch coming off the bench and are on bad teams, so you could probably easily get them? Or do you push some of your chips to the middle of the table and go get a player like DeJounte Murray? Because then you can strengthen up the bench by pushing either Hart or DiVincenzo back to the bench, especially in the case of DiVincenzo, add a little scoring punch back to that bench. And DeJounte Murray, it's not like you would be buying a guy that's a pending free agent. He's signed for a little while here. He's signed through the next 3 seasons, is a 2-time All-Star, is known as a great defensive player. So do you strike now? Do you strike while the iron is hot? Because you go through all of those things I listed here with the Knicks and what's going on in the Eastern Conference. Now's the chance to put together what could be a pretty special season, a pretty special year for the Knicks. And I say it all the time. No, tomorrow's not guaranteed. We've seen it the last couple of years with what goes on in sports, and not just that, what goes on in life in general, that nothing is guaranteed in the future. You want, while you have this opportunity, to go for it, to take that shot, to take that potential chance. Now, that's why even there was such a frenzy, such an uproar across New York sports radio, across New York television in the last couple days after a tweet by the one and only LeBron James, as he likes to be kind of cryptic at times with some of his tweets, posting a emoji of an hourglass on Thursday, just 1 week before the trade deadline. He may say that, oh, that's talking about his player option in his contract coming up this summer. After the reports that came out this past weekend, the fact that the little rift that's been going on there for a little while between CAA and by extension the Knicks and Clutch Sports run by Rich Paul, the fact that there was a meeting and both sides were able to hash out the issues that they've had, does that allow you to dream big? Does that allow you once again to think about a potential future summer of LeBron James? I know it's a crazy thing to think about. And listen, if you're a Knicks fan that's saying no to the idea because he's spurned you twice, you got to get the hell over that. But if you're a Knicks fan that's saying no, you like the youth of this team, you like the camaraderie of this team, and you don't want to give up a guy like Randall for a 1 to 2 year window with LeBron James, I can understand that point of view. But at some point, you're going to have to make that big move to swing for the fences, because at some point, Evan Fournier's expiring contract doesn't become so much of an asset. At some point, you got to use these draft picks, whether it's on yourself or in trade situations. It becomes a matter of time before you make that next big move, whether that's over the next 72 hours or that's this coming summer. But whether it's this summer or in the next couple days, there's a lot to be excited about with this Knicks team. Normally, I criticize and I rip Knicks fans for how over-the-top passionate they are. Not this time. You've really earned the right with that, and this team has earned the right for you to believe in them. All right, a lot to talk about over the remainder of this podcast. Give you some thoughts on Super Bowl LVIII coming up this coming Sunday, mixing some baseball and other football things throughout the podcast. So a lot to get to this week. Glad those of you who are either listening or watching the podcast right now could join me. And as I tell you each and every single week at this time, please sit back, relax, help put your feet up if you feel like it, and continue keeping it sports with M3.
I'll be back.
A little bit surprised by the Washington Commanders' choice as far as their new head coach is concerned. All along throughout this process, I had assumed that they were going to go with Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions, as their next choice. I figured he was going to be the guy. He looked like he was the new hot top candidate as far as the offensive coaching ranks are concerned. But then, to a lot of people's surprise, late last week, he made the announcement that he would be staying with the Detroit Lions rather than becoming a head coach. He is still young. He's only 37 years old. So if he's not completely in love with a job, if he's not completely in love with chasing a given role that is available, there's going to be future opportunities. There's going to be future times for him to take that chance, for him to bet on himself and become a head coach. But even with the Commanders having the number 2 overall pick in this draft, looking like they have more steady ownership, maybe he doesn't love the quarterbacks coming out in this draft. Maybe he's not in love with Caleb Williams or Drake May or Jalen Daniels as much as the rest of us are. And on top of that, next year, you could have some teams that are looking for new head coaches. You could have some teams that have proven quarterbacks in place already where he says, oh, maybe the Jaguars spot becomes available. Maybe the Eagles spot becomes available. He could have Jalen Hurts or Trevor Lawrence. Maybe the Dallas Cowboys become available, although you got to deal with the pain in the ass that is Jerry Jones. So there's going to be opportunities available for him. Maybe the Buffalo Bills is one that becomes a opening. You never know. As we see it all the time, there's always that weird, kind of crazy firing each and every single year that no one sees coming. I'm sure, 2 months ago, no one saw coming that the Tennessee Titans job was going to become available and that Mike Vrabel will be a free agent. And now he's got a year where he could sit back, view the landscape of the NFL, see how things play out, and try to get a head coaching spot next year. Same applies for Ben Johnson. So there's no reason to jump at a head coaching spot just to get a head coaching spot. The thing I don't like in all of this is the fact that now there's kind of this smear campaign coming from the Commanders and anyone that was involved in the interview process saying that either Ben Johnson was not great in the interview process or that his people were asking for too much money. I don't think that makes you look very good. That comes off as very Dan Snyder-ish. I would expect, with how I've seen Josh Harris run both the Devils and the Philadelphia 76ers, better from an organization that he's in control of. But they did make their decision for a new head coach as they are hiring the Dallas Cowboys defensive coordinator, Dan Quinn. And listen, you can't hold against Dan Quinn forever what happened in the Super Bowl against the New England Patriots when they blew that 28-3 lead. He did have a good run there with the Atlanta Falcons in the first 3 years. They were 10 games over 500 between those first 3 seasons, and he did go to a Super Bowl. And he's really rebuilt his reputation with the work that he did with the Dallas Cowboys, albeit that playoff game against the Packers was nothing to truly write home about. This is a guy definitely deserves a second crack at things. We saw how good he was with the Seattle Seahawks as his defensive coordinator for Pete Carroll before becoming the head coach in Atlanta. So this guy does have a strong track record as both a coordinator and a head coach. And now becomes a time for the Commanders where you figure out your future at quarterback. Because this is a team that has not had a winning season since 2016. They've not won a playoff game since 2005. They currently hold in their possession the number 2 overall pick in this draft, along with 4 other picks that will be in the top 100 in the draft. And that all becomes very interesting right now when you consider over the weekend, the surprise was not that they hired Dan Quinn as their head coach, but the decision at offensive coordinator when Cliff Kingsbury, who originally looked like he was destined to become the offensive coordinator of the Las Vegas Raiders, pulls out at the last hour and decides to go to Washington to become their offensive coordinator. Where that becomes interesting is because he was on USC's coaching staff this past season. USC, of course, the school of one Caleb Williams. And Caleb Williams and his camp have made it known he wants no part of playing in the Windy City for the Chicago Bears. Could there be a trade to be had at some point within the next 2+ months between the Bears and the Commanders, allowing the Commanders to come up and draft this generational talent? Or let's say the Bears decide to stick at position 1 in this draft, just take Marvin Harrison Jr., and then you have Caleb Williams sitting there for you at number 2. Going to be interesting chess match that goes on between these two franchises for these next 2.5 months. But at least they have positive things going on about them. At least they don't have things where you want to pull your hair out each and every single day, like the New York Jets do to me, like the aggravation and nonsense that goes on either at Florham Park, their training facility, or at MetLife Stadium. Because this article that came out in the last couple days in The Athletic, outlining all the internal issues with the Jets this past year, whether it be Robert Saleh pining for the endorsement of Aaron Rodgers late in the year so that he could save his job, or Woody Johnson going on Twitter, now known as X, reading opinions from fans and media members about what's wrong and sharing these with employees. Or even worse, the fact that Robert Saleh is trying to pull this fake tough guy routine late in the year. And when the story starts getting out about Zach Wilson not wanting to come back as the team starter after he got benched, and Saleh holding these meetings with his staff, threatening that, whoever's leaking this, if you come forward now, you won't get in trouble. Even went as far as trying to take their cell phones from them to see who was leaking this. Even after these threats were made, there were still multiple people detailing the information from because either they don't understand the harm that it does to the organization, or they don't give a damn to know the harm about it. It just looks like a place of total chaos. It looks like a place that has no true leadership, that has no one in true control here. I mean, Joe Douglas may try to act like he's in true control of this organization, but we've seen that despite how good his 2022 draft was, not a lot of his drafts have turned out great since being here, especially when you consider what a bust Mekhi Becton turned into, and the fact that they have not figured out the quarterback situation, becoming clearer by the day that they probably should have stuck with Sam Darnold for another year and traded those picks to put more talent around him. But Robert Saleh, all of this is just an embarrassing light on him. It's just an embarrassing view for someone that you want to be the head coach of your football team. Especially at a time where, as we mentioned before, you had one of the greatest free agent crops of head coaches available to you. And a group that may never be available to you again, or those coaches, the coaches that are still available going forward, they'll look at this next year if Robert Saleh gets fired saying, why the hell would I want to be part of this chaos? Why would I want to tarnish my name, my legacy, my reputation by being part of a team that looks in total disarray? All the way around, it's a mess. All the way around, it's disgusting to follow. And all the way around, day by day, it leads me to being more embarrassed being a Jet fan. But it's the team that I've rooted for since I was a child. It's a team that I've got season tickets for and got no choice but to try to root for the best going forward and hope that they get eventually the right people in there to solve this. Because I've always believed this. I believe that in sports, if you ever give up on your team, if you're a fan of one of these downtrodden, bad teams that's known as a loser, that things don't seem to go well, all of a sudden, things will start to turn around. All of a sudden, you give up, you try to go root for somebody else. They'll suddenly get it right. Would it be new ownership, new head coach, get the quarterback position right? So I got no choice but to stick with this. But that doesn't mean I'm not embarrassed by this situation, because clearly the Jets are a dysfunctional group, and a group that leaves every fan, every media member, and anybody in any associated with the Jets to continuously say, same old Jets.
I'll be back.
With the fact that we're, 10 days out from spring training, I did not expect there to be any kind of big trades left in this offseason. I more so expected there to be movement on the free agent front, because you still have some pretty decent players out there. We've talked about before how it looks like Blake Snell and Scott Boras overplayed their hand. And by the looks of things, with Blake Snell still being available, it has kind of put a block on Jordan Montgomery's free agent market. You still have a useful third baseman like Matt Chapman out there. You go through the free agency list, there's still players available. There were still guys as of last week, as far as the bullpen options, available to be had on 1 or 2 year deals. But I wasn't expecting any more big trades to take place that would kind of change the balance of power or reshape things in certain divisions until late last week, when we would see the Orioles make a big splash. Something that has not been very typical in the history of their organization, making the trade for former Cy Young Award winner Corbin Burnes from the Milwaukee Brewers. And I knew at some point Corbin Burnes was going to be traded, but I was more so becoming of the mindset that he would be traded at the trade deadline. The Brewers knew that they had to move on from Burnes because he was making it both privately and publicly known to them that this, no matter what, was going to be his last year as a Milwaukee Brewer. So they had to make some kind of move. The Brewers, I'm not sure what kind of position that they're in right now, whether they're rebuild mode or they still think they're a team that can make some noise in the NL Central. Because remember, Craig Counsell left them as a free agent to become the manager of the Chicago Cubs, a move that was surprising to everyone due to most thinking that he would take the Mets job with their general manager, David Stearns, and his former relationship with him in Milwaukee. But now the Brewers, in the last 6 months, have lost their manager and are moving on from their ace. And their ace now goes to a team in the Baltimore Orioles. That was kind of a surprise to everyone last year. We knew that the Orioles were coming. We knew that the Orioles had the ability to be a good team in the years to come with some of the prospects that were going to start coming up from the minor leagues. We had already seen Adley Rutschman. We had seen what they were doing as far as draft is concerned with guys like Gunnar Henderson, with drafting one of the top prospects in all of baseball, Jackson Holliday, just a couple of short years ago, and him in all likelihood making his big league debut this coming season. But with how there were question marks all around their rotation last year, people weren't expecting them to make as big a jump so soon, a year after having a .500 record. But they were the best team in the American League during the regular season last year, winning 101 games, making the postseason, albeit getting swept by the Texas Rangers in the division round. But this Orioles team looks like a team that is ready to win now and in the future, much like what I was talking about a few minutes ago with the New York Knicks, with all of this young talent that they have available to them. There were guys that were blocked at certain positions. So with the emergence of Gunnar Henderson and with the impending debut of Jackson Holliday, that makes a guy like Joey Ortiz expendable to use in trades, to use as a piece to send elsewhere to get a top package. Or in the case of a guy like DL Hall, well, you never like to say you have too much pitching. Kyle Bradish and Grayson Rodriguez really emerged for this team last year, especially in the second half. We're in the top 3 in the second half as far as ERA is concerned. You still have John Means there. You still have Dean Kramer. They had so much pitching depth that they were able to take Tyler Wells, who was struggling a bit, and move him to the bullpen for the second half of the season. So now all of these guys slide back in their rotation, have a little pressure taken off of them, and you bring in one of the top pitchers in baseball in Corbin Burnes, who, oh, by the way, is going into his walk season, is going into a year where he's looking to be one of, if not the highest paid starting pitchers in all of Major League Baseball. And with the fact that because you have so many young guys on this team, you can make this kind of financial commitment with adding Burnes's $15.5 million salary for 2024 due to the fact that your payroll now is only at about $90 million. And on top of that, things are going to start to look up now if you're a Baltimore Orioles fan. Because now you don't have to have concerns about finances. You don't have to have concerns about things being one-year wonders or short fixes or, we're just having Corbin Burnes for now. Because this could be a long-term commitment. This could be a long-term marriage with you and Corbin Burnes. As last week, a financial group led by Baltimore native David Rubenstein, the co-founder of Carlyle Group, has purchased the Baltimore Orioles from the Angelos family. As we know, the Angelos family, there's been some financial issues with them in recent years. After the team originally owned by Peter Angelos, then passed on to his son John Angelos once Peter began suffering from dementia. They've dealt with all sorts of issues, whether it be finances with the ballpark, the continued back and forth between them and the Washington Nationals when it comes to TV viewership or TV rights fees with Masson down there. So now you get out from under that nightmare from an ownership group that was not known as big spenders. And you get with a new ownership group that is led by not just one, but multiple billionaires, multiple guys that got some finances, as well as big-time former star athletes such as Orioles legend Cal Ripken and Grant Hill are investors in part of this group. Things are looking up if you're a Baltimore Orioles fan. And that's a very scary thing for everyone in the American League East. For a long time, they were just viewed as the doormat. They were viewed as the franchise that you could kick around, the franchise that they're a cute little participant in the AL East. But no longer. They've got young talent. They're adding pitching to this group. Now you've got ownership that, once it's approved, is going to be looking and willing to be big spenders. And that all puts a lot more pressure on the Yankees front office, which, when this trade for Corbin Burnes was made, I'm looking at it and saying, is Brian Cashman asleep at the wheel? What the hell is Cashman, his people, Hal Steinbrenner, who claimed that he was willing to let Cashman spend on another big free agent pitcher beyond Marcus Stroman? What are these guys doing? Because you know that there are holes in this pitching staff. You know that in a lot of fans' minds that it's Gerrit Cole and pray for rain, as you've got Rodon coming off an injury-plagued year, Nestor Cortez coming off an injury-plagued year, Marcus Stroman being a guy that's never pitched 200 innings in a season, and still a little bit of an unknown factor with Clark Schmidt. And this all coming after you traded a lot of your pitching depth to the San Diego Padres to get Juan Soto. What did they think? We'll just get Soto and the people will give us a free pass for the rest of the offseason? No, you had to go make more moves than that. When you make a move for Soto, that's signifying that's an all-in kind of situation, especially when there's the unknown of whether or not you're going to still have Soto beyond this season. While there's still free agent available pitchers with the likes of Blake Snell and Jordan Montgomery. Blake Snell, as we know, is out of his mind with his asking price. And it seems like Jordan Montgomery is just concerned with returning to the Texas Rangers, even though he wouldn't rule out a return to the Yankees. The Yankees have not seemed interested in him this offseason. You have to go out there and get a more stable force as your number 2 pitcher behind Gerrit Cole. And Burnes would have been that guy. And looking at this package that the Orioles gave up, you could have done something along those lines. You could have done something like Peraza and a pitcher of the equivalence of DL Hall, along with a compensation draft pick in this coming year's draft, and match that with the Baltimore Orioles. But instead, Brian Cashman continues to be such a prospect hugger, continues to be a guy that hangs on to these young players until they have no value whatsoever. You saw him do it with Miguel Andujar and Clint Frazier, and he was only willing to play them out of circumstance, not because, he thought that they were truly deserving of that spot. Remember, once upon a time, he didn't trade them for Garrett Cole, and then when it came time to eventually move on from them, they only designated those guys for assignment. They weren't able to get anything for them. And I'm worried that they're going to do the same thing with Peraza unless they have long-term envisions of him becoming their second baseman after this year, or at some point this year decide to trade Gleyber Torres and put Peraza at second base. To me, there's really no reason to still hang on to Peraza unless you're going to play him in the big leagues. It truly felt this last week, watching this move take place, watching all of the moves as far as bullpen options come off the board, especially not just Keon Middleton going to the St. Louis Cardinals or Hector Neris going with the Cubs, the Rays looking close to signing Phil Maton, but also losing Wandy Peralta, who was a steady force in that bullpen for the last 3 years. Losing him to the San Diego Padres. Feels like Brian Cashman has been asleep at the wheel since the Juan Soto trade was made. Yes, adding Marcus Stroman was a nice addition to this rotation. But I said it at the time, and I will say it again. I was okay with it as my number 4 or 5 starter, but I was not okay with it being the only addition to this rotation. There needed to be more done, and clearly Brian Cashman is not doing that.
I'll be back.
Well, I guess there's one positive that you can look at if you're a Jets fan, and it's kind of a positive for not just Jet fans, but Giant fans. Hell, any fan base whose team is coming into MetLife Stadium in the near future. And that looks like it's going to be the upgrade, the renovation that is long due for MetLife Stadium, getting rid of the artificial turf and changing to natural grass as the playing surface for the field at MetLife. Because it was announced over the weekend, as we know, in 2026, the U.S. is going to be the host country for the FIFA World Cup. Well, MetLife Stadium has been announced as the host venue for the World Cup final in 2026, and the FIFA regulations state that every host stadium must have grass as its playing surface. And listen, I know that the NFL and the Players Association have come out with these ridiculous stats saying, it's kind of 50-50 as far as injuries are concerned when it comes to artificial turf versus natural grass. But come on. We've all seen the deal here. We've all seen what's gone on at MetLife Stadium, how they've seemed to have more injuries than almost anybody else in the league when it comes to lower body injuries. Hell, this year alone, it felt like there were at least 10 to 15 guys that went down with some kind of injury between the Jets, Giants, and opposing teams that came into MetLife to play. So this is a upgrade, a renovation that is long overdue, and something that I hope that they don't just wait till 2026 to get done, that they do right here, right now, and have it ready for the 2024 regular season. But before we get to that 2024 regular season, there's still a little business to finish up here in the 2023-2024 season, that being Super Bowl LVIII coming up this Sunday. A rematch of the two teams that played in Super Bowl 54 just 4 years ago. But a lot has changed since then. Since then, you've seen the 49ers attempt to make upgrades from Jimmy Garoppolo and have to then wound up, in some people's minds, settling for what has been the biggest surprise in the NFL the last couple of years, that Mr. Irrelevant, Brock Purdy, has turned into not just a good quarterback from the Mr. Irrelevant spot, but a truly capable, quality starting NFL quarterback. Since then, you've seen the 49ers add Christian McCaffrey to this offense, add Chase Young to their defense, subtract a force like DeForest Buckner from their defensive line, but still remain a ferocious front there with Young, with Bosa, with Armstead, guys that can get to the quarterback and make an opposing offensive line's life a living hell for 60 minutes every Sunday. You've seen Deebo Samuel emerge as a dual threat player, as both a wide receiver and a running back. So there's been a lot of change that has gone on with the San Francisco 49ers. But this Chiefs team is a different team in its own right. There's no Tyreek Hill. There's no true number one elite dominant force at the wide receiver position for them. But you still have Patrick Mahomes. You still have Travis Kelce. You still have Chris Jones leading that defense. A defense that we underrated coming into the season, but carried the way for the Chiefs, was kind of their lead way in winning games until they could figure out things offensively, until they could figure out how they wanted to use Isaiah Pacheco, until a guy like Rashid Rice could emerge and be that number one option for them at wide receiver. Still not at the level of a Tyreek Hill, but hey, not many people are. You still have Andy Reid calling plays there. So while a lot of things are different with these two teams, a lot of things still remain the same. And when I look at this game, there's a couple of things that come to my mind. One, someone has got to be the one to step up for the Kansas City Chiefs and make a play. Make a big play somewhere along the lines. It can't just be Travis Kelce making every big play, because the 49ers, while seemingly no one has been able to do this, the 49ers are going to do their best to try to nullify the Travis Kelce factor in this game. And if you're the San Francisco 49ers, you can't come into this game sleepwalking. All right, let's face it. They are, quite frankly, even though they're the one seed in the NFC, quite frankly, they're lucky to be here. They sleptwalked heading into the game against the Packers. They sleptwalked heading into the NFC Championship game. Both of those games, they could have been knocked off earlier. Remember, the Packers had a touchdown lead in that game, couldn't put the ball in the end zone on multiple go-to-go situations that they had in that first half. The Detroit Lions had a 24-7 lead on them at halftime in the NFC Championship game, and then threw up on themselves in the second half, mixed in with some questionable coaching decisions on fourth down by Dan Campbell. They can't just rely on the fact that, oh, we're going to wake up at some point and will get things going in, say, later second quarter, early third quarter. Because no, you're playing a Kansas City Chiefs team that has done something that you want to do. They're multi-time champions. They've won 2 of the previous 4 Super Bowls. They want to cement what they feel is a dynasty era from them. They're going to come out firing on all cylinders. They're going to look to try to take McCaffrey out of this game and put all of the pressure on Brock Purdy. So if you're the 49ers, you've got to come out raring, ready to go. There can be no sleepwalking into this. These last 2 weeks had to have been your wake-up call and realize, all right, now it really gets serious. We were fortunate to get by the Packers. We were really fortunate to get by the Detroit Lions. But now you're going up against a whole different animal, a team that, while offensively they may not be the beasts they once were, you still have the greatest talent at quarterback of this generation, one of the best play callers in this generation in Andy Reid, and a team that, like I said, is looking to cement their legacy. And hopefully, once we get to Super Bowl Sunday, that's all that truly matters. Not who's dating who. Is that celebrity going to be able to make it back from Tokyo, or what celebrities, what famous people are going to be at this game? No. Let it be about the game of football. Let it be about the emotions that drive a team to win a championship, and then the heartbreak that is losing this game. Because losing this game, more so than any of the other sports, is the most painful thing across the 4 major sports. We've seen it time and time again. In Major League Baseball, if you got a great starting rotation, you can make it back the next year. You can make a run at things. In the NHL, you have a great goaltender and a solid core around them. You can attempt to repeat or chase that down again. In the NBA, more times than not, it comes down to health late in the season and who's the healthiest. But in the NFL, it's one game. It's not multi-games like the other sports. It's one game, do or die. And with how this is such a hard cap league, how you have the cap raising all the time, but you have players jumping around all the time, it's hard to keep a group around together for a long period of time. And what the Chiefs have been able to do with keeping Mahomes, Kelsey, and Chris Jones as the figureheads of this run that they've been on together on this team is special when you consider they're all top 2 to 3 players at their given position in this sport, and you've got to be able to have the financial wherewithal to fill out other spots on your roster. And there's no guarantees that you get back here year after year. That's what makes what they're doing even more impressive. So for the Chiefs, it's a chance to label themselves forever as a dynasty, while the 49ers, it's a chance at redemption. It's a chance of finally having Kyle Shanahan's moment in the sun, putting no doubt in people's minds that Brock Purdy is a real quarterback and not just a placeholder in that position. And for one of these teams, they will have the ultimate thrill of victory, the win of wins. And the other will have the heartbreak of defeat. Will have something that they got to sit there for a full year and hope that they can get back to this spot. And we'll see this coming Sunday night who will get that ultimate glory. And that, my friends, was Keeping It Sports with M3 for Monday, February 5th, 2024. Everyone, please have a great night. Have a fun, safe, happy, healthy week. You got one life, people. You might as well live it up. Please enjoy Super Bowl LVIII, no matter who wins, unless you're a Chief or 49ers fan. And I'll talk to you guys again, same time next week. Until then, peace.
We have to go. Good night, everybody. I have had enough of you. Thank you for all the fun. Thank you. Hey, shut up, will ya?
I don't want to see you, I don't want to hear you, I don't want to smell you. Now leave. I'll be back.